This is the meeting of the Carson City Library Board of Trustees, starting just a few minutes late, but not too bad. Let's go ahead and start with agenda item 1, the call to order and the roll call, please.
Chairperson Knight,
Present?
Trustee Lucas,
Present.
Trustee Markle, Trustee Nichols.
Present.
A quorum is present.
Thank you. You shocked yourself on your time. All right, everybody, let's go ahead and move on to agenda item 2, public comment. Members of the public who wish to address the library board may come forward and speak on any topic that's relevant or within the authority of the library board. Do we have any members in the room? Seeing none. Anybody on the phone?
There are no callers on the line at this time.
Thank you. Let's move on to agenda item 3. That is approval of the previous meeting's minutes. This would have been for the March 24th meeting. I hope you all had an opportunity to review the draft minutes. Do we have any modifications we'd like to make to those minutes? If not, any motions to approve those minutes?
I'll motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you.
I will second the motion.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Let's move on to agenda item 4A. And this is discussion and possible action concerning the process for which the annual unclassified job performance appraisal and evaluation will be completed of the library director. And so what I would just like to do with this agenda item is provide you an update where we are in that process. We have sent out that link for the 360 eval that went out to all of our library staff, and those responses have been compiled and prepared into a report. The next piece I will need is assessment from all of you on this board. So keep an eye on your carson.org email. I'll be sending that out hopefully tomorrow, if not sometime early next week. You'll get a blank form to fill out. That is the employee performance appraisal. And I did want to get feedback from you if you felt that you wanted to see the compiled results of the 360 eval before you give your piece to inform your piece of it, or if you wanted to go purely based on what you see in the meetings. I'll leave that to discussion.
Trustee Lucas, for the record, I think I would like to see the results of the 360 eval.
Prior to
Yes, because I think
offering
that
okay.
I think that what we do see here is valuable, and it's certainly a piece of it. I think it's only one tiny piece.
Okay.
So
It is a big job.
yeah.
Yes.
I agree. I'd also like to see that before, filling that out.
Sounds good. Okay, so
Joy Holt, the Department Business Manager for the record. Trustee Knight, do you have the most current unclassified employee performance appraisal
I do.
sheet?
I
Okay.
do straight from HR
Perfect.
earlier this week. So
Okay.
that's what I'll take.
Okay.
And then I guess the only other piece of that, I'll send that out at the same time I send out the appraisal form. And then I'll, in that email, I'll give you a date by which I'd like those returns so I can compile those for our meeting. The only other piece of that is just the regularly required trainings that I believe you've already enrolled, or whatever the tool you use to do those trainings for things like, the HR trainings, sexual harassment awareness. I feel like there's maybe a risk management one. There's a couple of those.
They've changed them recently. We
wanted to
actually
see
just
those.
got an update for the unclassified employees. So how that works is we just, as we take them, we print out our certifications, or I am our admin, so I can print those out for each of the employees if they forgot to do it or lost it at the time when they took the training. And that's what has to go with the appraisal. If they're not with the appraisal, then HR will kick it back to me. So
Very good. Sounds good. So that's where I'll appreciate the input and the direction, and that's what I'll do. Any other pieces on agenda item 4A before we move on? All right, let's move on to agenda item 4B, presentation, discussion, possible action regarding the approved Carson City Library calendar for 2022. This comes down to a memo from the city about Juneteenth being an observed holiday. What we have already approved as of last December for our calendar did not include Juneteenth as a holiday. So what I would like to kind of put just on our radar is that it seems historically that we had been observing holidays by closing the library. And I think part of that has to do with who we think our patrons are and maybe also lining things up with the way the city does their business. If we think that the library is like other city businesses. And also, if the 9 to 5, we've got a lot of state worker types in this town. If they've moved away from being library patrons, then maybe it doesn't make a difference that the library is closed on holidays. But for people who have those holidays off who might want to patronize the library on a holiday, that opportunity is not currently available to them now. So it's something to maybe keep in mind for our discussion for the 2023 calendar. I think that'll probably be on an agenda maybe in December. But what this is pointing out to me is that, why do we do that? Why do we close on holidays? I think if we want to just match what we've already approved and what's already been done, that we would close on Juneteenth in observance of the holiday, because that's what we're doing right now with all the other holidays. But I think maybe it's worth stepping back and asking ourselves why we close on holidays in the first place. So that's my 2 cents, and I'll be happy to hear what you all have to say about it.
I completely understand where you're coming from because, any day that you can get people in is a great day. But I would also want to consider the staff and see, are kids out of school? Yes, it'd be great to have them at the library, but like if the majority of the staff had kids and they're out of school because it's a holiday, then they've got daycare issues and we may be short-staffed because some may decide they need to stay home with their kids. So I think we need to think about that as well. How big is the holiday and who does it affect? That would be my only concern.
That sensitivity. Any thoughts, Trustee Lucas?
I think I would ask our library staff what their opinion is on that, because I do think it's a valid point that might be a high visit day that people would like to take advantage of. I mean, I know when I have days off, it's like, ooh, what can I do today? But also, library staff also appreciates having a day off, I'm sure. I don't know if there would be a lot of pushback or people would feel like that was really very disappointed that those were taken from them. Do you have any insight for us on how you think that would?
If I may, Trustee Lucas, thank you. Todd Colgrove for the record. Thank you for the question. We don't have any historical context in terms of whether or not it'll have impact to have the library open on the day or not. I'd be more than happy to raise the question to staff just to get a general read. My knee-jerk reaction is that it's a mixed bag. As a general rule, we love a day off, but if staff were working in the library in that day, they would also be getting compensated for the holiday rate of pay, which has its own rewards. I would encourage the board, if the board is open to considering the question longer term, perhaps to revisit this for holidays generally as 2 different issues. One might be for holidays throughout the year, so that we can collect some more input so that when the board's considering the calendar for the coming year, we can give you better input. And a way to do that might be to pilot this year so that we could actually say, well, 1 person showed up, no people showed up, or actually it was like a normal day. If that would give the board more information to make the decision, we'd be happy to do that.
I suspect that this Juneteenth might be like a normal day because it falls during the summer, so it's not going to make a difference for school. And other than our government workers, it's not one that like the rest of most office type jobs get, if that makes sense. Like I've never had an office job that gave me Martin Luther King Day or some of the lesser ones, and not
Nevada
lesser,
Day.
but less observed holidays that maybe the governments and schools observe. So I think if we are going to start thinking about staying open holidays, maybe we look at them too as far as like magnitude and impact, because I think a lot of people just get the big ones, you know. Of course, I don't see that we would not want to be open on Thanksgiving or Christmas. I think people expect things to be closed on 4th of July, maybe. But
Memorial Day, Veterans Day.
those, I mean, Memorial Days, Labor Day are big ones,
Martin
but
Luther
like
King,
President's Day, Martin
yeah.
Luther King Day, these are all days that like I and everybody, all of my partners have always worked through. So I'm,
Oh,
yeah, I don't know. I mean,
this is worth
I think-
having more
yeah,
discussion later.
I think before we approach the 2023 calendar, maybe we should definitely get some input and think about that.
If I may also,
So-
Trustee Lucas, I would actually almost defer the question to Department Business Manager Holt, because you also have very keen insight in terms of scheduling the desks, the larger impact, and what the art of the possible might be. What's your knee-jerk reaction on that?
My knee-jerk reaction is it will be a mixed bag. As far as it stands right now with kids, not many of the staff members have kids, but that doesn't mean that we won't hire staff members down the road that do. That said, I don't, as far as it pertains to Juneteenth, for example, this year, I don't think the staff is particularly concerned, other than they would like to know if they're going to have the day off. You know,
That's fair.
but I don't think that it would be, I don't anticipate, and my sense is not that anyone would have too big of an issue if we were to stay open. I also agree with you, Trustee Lucas, that I think it really will depend on the holiday. So I think that people will probably struggle if we were to consider staying home for Thanksgiving or staying open for Thanksgiving or Christmas, because of those being times that people travel. And we do have staff that travel because their families are in other locations. Most of our staff actually have to travel at those holidays. So, but things like Memorial Day, Veterans Day, I'm trying to think of some of the other holidays that I agree with you, quite frankly, I've not had off. Some places have Good Friday off, which that was weird when I experienced that when I lived in the South. But so I think that the staff would probably accept it if we were to be mindful of what holidays truly. And I do think that it is an opportunity for us to provide service on days that people are kind of looking for something to do. And especially if it's like and I will say too, the staffing can be difficult if it's a middle of the day, or excuse me, middle of the week holiday. But the city accounts for that because they usually give us like a Monday or a Friday off. But that can also present its own set of difficulties if someone wants to take an extra long weekend. Then that can short staff us on a Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday. But those are things that they're solvable. Usually people give us enough of a heads up that we can work with it. Certainly we wouldn't want that to be much of a factor in the decision making process for holidays. But I mean, my short answer is that I think it would depend on the holiday.
Thank you. I would just amplify that. Traditionally, perhaps in the previous several years in my role as director of the library, it would have had less impact. As you'll see in the director's report, we're beginning to really amplify the connection with our community. This morning when I came in, the library was literally alive with kids from 2 years old up to 80, ricocheting around, talking everything from book club to story time to summer learning challenge. It's coming to life in a sense that having it closed really does have an impact, because those individuals will miss it. Not to push in one direction or the other.
I think it's also worth considering why the day's a holiday federally in the first place now. And in the memo from the city, particularly this line, based on the foregoing and in the spirit of Carson City's longstanding support of liberty, freedom, and democratic values, Juneteenth will be observed by the city. If that weighs in our decision to follow suit in that area as well. And of course, all of that with, I think, the caveat that we'll see what the legislature does next session.
Right, I was going to say, because I don't believe the state
We're-
is celebrating this year.
Great. So I think the question in front of us is, are we closing for Juneteenth?
Madam Chair, Todd Colgrove again, just to interrupt, I would ask, would it be helpful if the library ramped up some of its social media content in support of, or to celebrate the city's longstanding respect of liberty and in the language of the memo on or around Juneteenth, regardless, just while it's a topic for consideration. You're absolutely right. We don't want to act as if we're keeping the library open in defiance. We don't want to suggest that we're devaluing it, but we could certainly, and we're planning on some social media content underlying the city's valuing of that.
Does that include programming? Would that include specialized programming potentially? It says, hey, it's Juneteenth and let's have book club story time, something.
It certainly could. It doesn't at this moment, but we could raise that conversation and rework it. We've been very flexible with the programming that we're doing today.
What do you think?
I'm thinking in which case, if you decide to stay open, maybe that goes on the marquee in the days leading up to, or
Yeah.
we will be open Juneteenth offering a special story time or whatever the
Right.
decision may be.
Right, honoring Juneteenth by offering certain programming potentially, if that's something that we want to do.
My only
Get some people in
hesitation,
and make it worthwhile to stay open.
I think that's brilliant thinking. I'll turn to the right and look toward District Attorney Woodbury because there's always the potential that we might be aggravating a subset of the community that might not like it. The library is quite comfortable going down that road, but I'll defer to any advice the district attorney might give us on that.
Floor is yours.
Jason Woodbury, District Attorney. For the record, I think the discussion reflects, you know, some really well-considered judgment. And I can see potentially offending segments of the community by not closing, but I believe the board is sensitive to that. And if you are going to remain open, certainly some sort of programming put in place to honor the purposes of the holiday could very well, you know, alleviate that. But, you know, it's a policy call and you're having the discussion you need to have.
Thank you for that. I wonder if this is something that might resolve itself though too, if we see what happens next session. If we just say, okay, we'll close because we close for all the other holidays, let's just close this time. And then we'll see what we see after next session, if we're gonna follow suit in terms of what's a state holiday. But, you know, it's still worth considering if we stay open, and then we find that we want to perhaps stay open for days that previously would have been closed for 2023, to say, okay, if we are going to be open on a holiday, that we ask that there is programming that amplifies the holiday in a way that is honoring to our community. Is that something we want to try to do this year just with Juneteenth, though?
I don't know. I'm sorry, Trustee Nichols, for the record. I am a little torn now because I actually think it would be a really good idea to stay open and offer programming and put it on the marquee. And this is a new, sorry, I just blanked out. This is a new holiday. I almost said vacation. It's a new holiday. And a lot of people aren't really sure what it is. So this may be a really good way for Carson City to learn what it is. I mean, I see programming, but I also see like we put books out like we do for, African American History Month or Native American Heritage Month, and all that stuff. Put that out, and yeah, story time gears towards that, or like, like you said, book clubs, or just have some stuff out. I think it's a fantastic opportunity to celebrate, again, to celebrate and teach people. And then going forward, if we decide we want to be open or closed on holidays, I think we can review it then.
Is that something that could be put together, library staff, either one of you, if you want to paint it all? It's what's in the case out front, what's on the marquee, what's going on social, what's actual programming that could be put together, how quickly?
Joy Holt, Department Business Manager for the record. I think the cases are probably already reserved. Out because we reserved them months ahead. If they're not, though, I will reserve one for June. We're very likely already having thoughts and plans in the works for displays, such as you mentioned, Trustee Nichols, as we do for other celebratory events and months. Like your example, African American History Month, or any Native American History Month or Heritage Month. The Pacific Islanders kicking off in May, and we'll be having displays to highlight books and stories and authors that are focused on those in those areas. So it wouldn't be. I would not. I'm fairly certain we've had some conversation in our collection development meetings about that, and we also will highlight. Using some of the software that we use, we'll give recommended picks. We'll do the rote stuff that we already do for holidays that are specific to that particular holiday. And it's far out enough now that we could certainly curtail a story time event around Juneteenth. We would probably need to look at the collection and see what we have available that would be age appropriate and appropriate in other areas, so that we're not. So there's some treacherous waters that we could be wandering into there that we just want to make sure that we're not, but we can't please everyone always. So we would just be very, but in most of the books that I've seen that we do have in our collection that are about this topic and the topics of the like, are conscious of that. And so it's really an excellent opportunity for education, and I think that we could certainly plan an event. Storytime would be pretty simple. But our programming team, or de facto programming team, is really creative. So there could be lots of things that we could come up with. The one thing that would be a little bit of a challenge right now is that that's also summer learning. Summer learning is going to kick off about a week or two before. So we're going to be planning that. We're pretty ramping up the planning on that as we speak. But it's one day. So we could certainly do something honoring that holiday and providing an opportunity to teach our community about what it actually is. And so that's the great thing about story time, is because it's not just teaching the children, it's also sometimes teaching the parents. So I don't foresee that it would be difficult. And I know that our team would be on board. I mean, we're already on board to some extent with the stuff that we would already be doing to celebrate the holiday. But yeah, and we could easily plan something for that day, if it has to be me that does the story time, because I am the former story time lady.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for that input. Does that answer?
I think I'm in support of maybe staying open and maybe doing this as a little bit of a test case, and trying to do something in honor of,
Okay.
not just like glossing over it and staying open, but
If we're going to be open for a holiday, we need to be honoring the holiday.
Yeah, and maybe see how this goes, and we're not going to mess with the rest of the calendar this year, I'm thinking, right? But
I don't think so.
we'll see what the legislature says about this holiday, and then we'll
Yeah.
see how this goes and discuss for next year for some of the less traveled holidays.
All right. What say you, Trustee Nichols?
I agree.
And we're staying open.
Yes, I'd like to see the library stay open and celebrate.
Celebrate and
Educate.
educate. It's the role of the library in the community anyway.
That's
right?
right. So why not?
Why not? We'll give it a try. And then I think we're all leaving this meeting tonight in the back of our minds, considering what other holidays perhaps we could be applying this logic to for next calendar year. All right, so does that mean holiday pay for the staff if we're staying open? Okay.
Is that a large premium?
Todd Goldgrove for the record. It's significant to the employee in the overall schema of things. I think we've achieved significant savings that'll balance that easily out throughout the year. But I'll defer to the department business manager. It's not necessarily sustainable long-term, if that makes sense. This year is what I'm saying that I doubt that we would notice it. But in the coming years, it would end up being built into the budget.
Sound right to you?
Joy Holt, Department Business Manager for the record. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with that. I think that's an absolute spot-on assessment that it won't be particularly impactful to us this year. It would have impact going forward, of course. One thing to remember too is that the city has a contingency fund for these events in the event that we are budgeting. When we're budgeting, let's assume that we'll see a hit this year because it wasn't planned for in our fiscal year 22 budget, but likely we will not see the impact of it because we have such salary savings. But let's assume, for argument's sake, that we did, and we found ourselves in the red. There's a contingency fund for those types of events. But I'll quote the CFO that the library almost always has salary savings, so we never find ourselves in the red there, which is a double-edged sword, actually. So going forward in fiscal year 23, if the city decides to be open or closed on those days, then I would imagine that they will build that into the budget. But again, another thing to consider, and this again, it should maybe not be that impactful in the decision-making process, but if we choose to remain open, we are not just aligning with the purpose of the library, but also and not necessarily, saving any salaries because they get paid one way or the other. But I think it could potentially, just another thing to be thinking about, underline the purpose of some of what we're doing, which I think is a good message to be sending out to all of us, to our stakeholders, to our city stakeholders, to our community stakeholders, and to our users and our staff too. So I think that's something to consider as well, the message that it sends in a positive way. Just my 2 cents.
And if I may chime in to follow on with what Department Business Manager Holt stated, I'll remind the board that collectively we've worked together by removing the partial day closures leading up to holidays that we had in years past. We've already managed to change the scheduling so that the library is available an additional 5 days out of the year. So that 5 days, along with additional holidays going forward, they're bona fide services to the community, and we will balance them out.
Thank you.
We do need, as you say, look at the budget though long term. So I'm just throwing this idea out to think about later. One of the things we might consider then, if it's a real big hit on the budget, long term, is maybe having those days open, but having limited service and asking the staff to volunteer. So maybe you don't have a full staff that day, but the people who want to work that day. And again, you may have some limited services. Maybe the maker space isn't open, or if it is, it's limited, but
The volunteer to work and get paid, as in
Yes.
I'm willing to work and get paid. for
Right,
this. Okay, thank you.
right.
Um,
Yes,
making
not
sure.
volunteer, I do this for free. No, but
Version
that,
of
but that may,
volunteerizing.
that may help balance out, the long-term holiday pay.
Those are excellent suggestions, Trustee Nichols. I'll also point out that we have collectively been working together to make changes so that the staffing models of the service desks are more efficient. So in a real sense, I doubt that long-term we'll notice a significant change here. I think the library is operating more efficiently and effectively. We will certainly make it a voluntary option to the extent that we can within the agreement with the classified employees as to whether or not they're working that day.
Okay, well, I think if there's no further, if there's no further discussion, I'd be willing to entertain a motion on keeping the library open on Juneteenth with the understanding that the library would be honoring that holiday by designing some specialized programming messaging around it.
I will make a motion that the library can remain open on Monday, June 20th, 2022, in honor of Juneteenth with programming, appropriate programming that will honor the holiday and educate on its purpose.
Thank you for your motion. Very nicely stated.
I'll second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. And let's move right on down the agenda then. Agenda item 5A. Presentation and discussion of reports concerning activities and operations of the library since the presentation of the last report. This is the library director. It's your show.
Thank you, Chair Knight, and my apologies that the director's report and the associated budget reports are showing up as late materials. You have print copies in front of you, and they're on the library website. A quick thumbnail dance through this very colorful report. You're seeing snapshots from the library's social media, which again is very engaged and active. I'll start with the requested highlights from the Public Library Association meeting. If I read that correctly last time. I've managed to get here completely without that copy. One moment while I bring it up on the computer. If you have a spare. Thank you, Joy. Thank you again. So this is the handout that leads with the heading Session/Notes from the Public Library Association's Conference. These are titles of a number of the sessions that I was able to participate in. A number of things that are very exciting. And there's some common threads that run through here that I'll call the board's attention to because they are bona fide challenges and things that we're needing to wrestle with. I'll bring to your attention prepare your library for today's censorship battles. Also, how to respond to challenges and concerns about library resources. It will already be on the trustees and the board's radar, the number of challenges to intellectual freedom and traditional operation of libraries that are going on nationwide. Everything from book burnings, literally, to challenges around LGBTQIA issues. Critical race theory, Florida recently removing 3/4 of the textbooks because there was some perceived reference to CRT. Also, most recently, databases. Library databases is another word for some of our research tools, that somehow the digital resources that the libraries are providing in some spaces are being used as tools to turn our children into fill in the blank, communists or something undesirable that is an excuse. That these are all examples of things that could very easily land on the board's consideration should a challenge come up. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Another one here that was quite exciting to me was a session called Leveraging Staff Talent to Create Your Strategic Vision. In essence, what we've been doing this past year, all of us as a team. So we're right spot on. Another one that I'll point out, and I may be the only offender in the room of an inbox that grows without bounds when it comes to email. But I'm finding that to be very helpful. This particular session that I'm hoping to work into a professional development with our staff. But just a couple of the high notes there are leading with the vow. Everyone raising their hand. Oh, sorry, the other hand. My inbox is not a storage location. It is a processing station. It's not there. It was quite
Your records
remarkable.
were
And some the simple hot tips that he had there, and there's a link, www.efficientlibrarian.com, where this is detailed in more high points. But the simple thing is just to jump in and change it to sort by sender. Anything that's 3 months or older, either archive it or delete it. It's not happening. You're not coming back to it. And then as it's going forward, there are 4 folders that you create. In addition to your inbox, one of them is archive it because you might need it for reference. And newsflash, if you can find it on the web, you don't need it in your mailbox. Another folder, someday, maybe you might come back to it. A third one that is called waiting for, that you revisit because you're going to use that to poke and follow up on things that you need to do. And then the fourth one is an action file, and the hot tip is the 2-minute rule. Just getting things done. If you can do it in 2 minutes, do it, or delegate it, or defer it. There you go. Those are the 3s. And that's something, again, I look forward. My inbox is still a smoking hot slag heap as of this moment, but I look forward to implementing this once I can get over my fear of having lost something that should be there. I also wanted to point out the session on bringing NASA to Nevada, a hands-on learning partnership. That was presented by Nevada State Librarian Mike Strom, along with someone from DRI. It's some of the work that we've played part of, and so I made a point of showing up there and pressing the flesh with our colleague up down the street. One of the tools that I specifically want to follow up with is Library IQ, and that was a session called How to on patron mapping to expand and strengthen outreach. In other words, where are the people that are currently using our library in this community? Because what we want to know is where are the people that aren't? That's where we can focus our outreach and begin to connect geographically as well as by age groups and demographics. There are tools that are already in place, and I look forward to running that to ground more in some details. And a final one, beyond late fees, eliminating access barriers for all community members. That focus was really much more about things that we're already doing but can do more of. For example, homebound. How can we be more inclusive of folks that aren't able to use our libraries today? A number of good examples that we'll be stealing some of those ideas for. A couple of just insights that I've found to be really useful that I look forward to making some progress on. One is just the concept as COVID as having been the great accelerant of all of this change. That change continues, and it's useful. Another one that's terribly exciting that is right in the wheelhouse of the Office of Intellectual Freedom at ALA, which is the core concept of legislation that states have adopted, a number of states now, including states that you might not think of as being particularly liberal or forward-thinking. Examples might be Missouri, Maryland, Tennessee, but the argument to our ebook vendors or any of our electronic vendors that, I'm sorry, we can't enter into an unreasonable contract because we're a public library, and under state law, it's not reasonable to ask the public to pay $80 for an electronic version of a book that you can buy in print for $20. So as this is gaining momentum, and at this point there's on the order of a dozen states that have adopted it, that increases the pressure to adopt legislation nationally that can really make a dent in our electronic resources. As Department Business Manager will point out, Joy Holt will affirm, a lot of the funds that have been available for closing the digital divide that have been diverted into electronic content, such as ebooks, would go much, much further if the prices we were being charged for those were on the order of what we pay for our print. So that's something on the radar. Also, another one that's kind of exciting and should have been on my radar, but something as simple as Wi-Fi enabled door locks for collaboration rooms that are tied in with the reservation system of the library. So you can come in and say, I want to reserve this room on thus and such a time. And behind the scenes, automagically, the code gets sent to your email and to the Wi-Fi door lock so that at the time, now you can unlock the door and go in and use it. And we know that it was you. And when you leave, it's locked again. Oh, yeah, please jump in, Trustee Lucas. Isn't it a brilliant idea? Yes, I thank you so much. That's exactly the idea. Yeah. And so any ideas like that you happen to come across, the saying is that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And I'm kicking myself for not having seen that as the Airbnb idea. It's a wonderful idea.
You could give them their code for their time slot. It gives
Yes.
them access to that room,
Yes.
and then the next group to use it would get a different code.
And it can absolutely be a game changer, especially when it enables us as staff to operate more efficiently and effectively with more accountability.
And
Did you-
like you said, it tracks stuff too, so you could probably use it for metrics.
We absolutely could. And it's sort of in the same vein as a guest pass, which is also trackable and a one-time use. So, yeah, it would be, I've seen them at other libraries and they're cool. So,
In fact, I understand that you can buy them on Amazon.com or even at Home Depot. Again, thank you. And these are just bits and pieces. Again, another saying that talent imitates, but genius steals. That's what we do in our professional development, is try to steal the best ideas from our colleagues so that we can keep the library moving forward. I'll come right back then to the director's report, and I wanted to announce the good news that we've also just received the award of the $15,000 digital media collection. It's ARPA funding again that we're going to wait for the first of the fiscal year before we start drawing a bead on it. It won't take particularly long to spend. I believe that we have 80, 90 days still to spend on that, and so we should be good to go. Social media continues to grow, not by leaps and bounds, but it's growing. I also wanted to underline and remind the board and the community more broadly that what you're seeing as Big Kids Butterfly Story Time is what we used to call Family Story Time, because Family Story Time has now calved into multiple story times because we're being so effective with it. When we compare apples to apples for that Family Story Time, pre-COVID, we had on average about 23 attendees to the story time. Our recent averages have been bouncing between 35 and 40 of just that particular event. So it's nearly double. We've also gone on and taking them out of order, but we've got, Big Kid Butterfly Story Time, the Baby Bookworm Story Time, which happens on Tuesdays at 10:30 in the morning. We're in the third week of that, and I believe that's nearly doubled every time that we've done it, right? We started with 3 babies and then 6 and now 8, and there's just so much cuteness that people are just coming by to peek in the door, and it's beginning to become a problem. And so that's the kind of problem we want to have, though, and it's really good news. I also wanted to mention that the Capital City Reads, which we just wrapped on the book conversation on, last year, we thought we were knocking it out of the park because it was setting a new record when we actually were able to buy 70 books along with the electronic versions of the Capital City Read title. This year, we had to go back and buy more. We had 120 and we still ran out. And so we've actually had a more than 71% increase of that year over year. And it was a book called The Soul of an Octopus. You wouldn't think that that would be a real, page turner. And yet the community is engaging it, reading it. It's around STEM issues and it's quite exciting. And we're moving on to the next step. In fact, we also, as part of Capital City Reads, were able to launch our outreach with the senior center in town. After there was a little bit of a concern, I think the question was, where's the candy? We need sugar if we're going to do this, but we were able to work around that, and the senior center was thrilled to have the library there, and it's now a monthly thing where we're going back and we're working with them individually and able to bring some of our other library resources, such as Novelist, along with them. I was reading this title and that title. Oh, then you'd really like this one. And so we're beginning to engage more deeply. I also wanted to mention that in case it missed your radar, that one of the direct outcomes of our ongoing strategic planning reworking was identifying the problem with the limits that we had in place on the number of movies that patrons could check out. And so we've increased that now. Now patrons can check out 10 movies, and we doubled the length of time that they could check it out for 4 weeks, because there was a backlog for it, and it's been wildly well received. So this was a quick and dirty win that came out of that moved it forward, that should be on your radar because you made it possible. So should that come up, it's not causing concern because we have more titles and the usage of it is such that it seems to be balancing out nicely. So in terms of works in progress, I wanted to make sure to provide a staffing update. We currently still have interviews pending for the library assistant positions that hopefully we'll be filling those here within the next several weeks. Also the position reworks that has been on this board's radar for now a number of meetings have made it past first one gauntlet, then another, and we're now on to the final steps. So the reworks of the positions that a number of the manager positions that were in place have been reworked to be, one is it's been called in this board a social worker board. We call it a workforce development and social services coordinator, someone to work with us both in terms of workforce development and connecting with the external agencies to provide social services. A second position is a programming and outreach coordinator. As you can see, all of the programming and outreach that's blowing up here is really in need of someone to ride hard over it and help make sure it becomes even more possible. Again, hats off to Department Business Manager Holt and Haley Swift and Rachel March and the organic team across libraries that has made all of this expansion of programming and outreach possible. But it requires a little more coordination going forward.
Haley Wilson. I have to say Haley Wilson as well. We have two
Good
Haleys.
heavens, my apologies. Yes, I've conflated the Haleys.
No, they're both
Wilson.
very actively engaged, but we cannot recognize one without the other.
It absolutely is, yes, and thank you. That's brilliant. Also, the two remaining pieces are, one of them is the technology coordinator position, critical path. As soon as we can get that there. And then the final one is literally a reclass of the position of the department business manager to be the deputy director position, so that we have finally put in place some sort of succession planning. And what we've done is we've pulled some of the responsibilities that were in the other manager positions, and they had landed on department business manager Holt's plate already. So we said, let's combine them into a deputy director position and carry it forward. Those have gone through the internal finance committee with the department city manager's approval. In fact, I believe her words were something like, when it came to the, apologies for speaking as if you're not in the room, Joy, but on the department, the city manager's words were literally, Isn't that what we used to do? Didn't we used to have a deputy director? And the answer is yes. That's what most of the departments in the city have for those reasons. So those are moving forward. They were reviewed by the Board of Supervisors at their last meeting. No questions were asked. It's moved on to the next step. Now those supplemental requests are incorporated into the city budget. On May 19th, it'll be back in front of the Board of Supervisors who may have further questions. And if it passes muster at that point, then we're on to July 1. And after July 1, correct me if I'm wrong, it's my understanding that's when we can ask to fill. And we are all looking forward to that day. I also wanted to make sure that it's on the board's radar that we have HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning repairs scheduled at the library starting May 23rd, which means that there will be at least 5 full days starting May 23rd when the library won't have air conditioning happening because those repairs are being affected. It may result in complaints, and forewarned is forearmed. Also, in terms of the pilot programs I had mentioned, the baby bookworm story time, which has also doubled. The Big Kids Butterfly story time, the bilingual story time, which launched yesterday. It only had 1 participant in it, but we anticipate that to grow. The Pajama Story Time also launches May 4th, and one that I'm particularly excited about is the Midnight Readers Society. And I'm excited about it because that's an organic program that has come to us from our revitalized Teen Library Council, which is a group that I've seen actually double. It's still a very small group, but it's doubled in membership. And they're coming up with great ideas and saying things like, we had great ideas, but they weren't implemented. We're making a concerted effort to try to implement them and pilot them. That's one that has already led to a collaboration with the school, with our active conversation, one of the teachers saying, that's great, I really want to make it possible for my students to get extra credit to be in there. Can I be in it too? And we're actually vetting the question with the Teen Library Council because our sort of sense of it is that that might change the dynamic, but we want to make sure that it's possible, and it may turn into 2 programs. One that's the Teen Library Council that's specifically the teens, and a second one that might be a covert outreach mission to the school where library staff are going out and playing an active role. And I believe that that's all that's fitted to print in this meeting. Trustees, thank you for your attention.
And thank you for your report. Any questions from the trustees? I might have a question. I always have a question. Do we have an update on the benches or chess table or anything that we had previously discussed, and what are we going on this?
Thank you, Chair Knight. The question as to an update on the tables or reworking the landscaping in front of the building has not moved forward. And that is a combination of focusing on expanding the outreach right now in our traditional channels and also wanting to have the opportunity to bring our workforce development and social services coordinator very much into the conversation. In other words, it's very tempting on my part to jump in and try to solve this problem, but, and I shouldn't use the word problem, answer the question, how might we rework that so that it's more inclusive and engaging? And I don't know enough of what I don't know. I do know that per the board's previous direction, it will take significant outreach and working with the agencies that had been identified previously. And with all that in mind, it's my hope that the first hire that we get in place will be that social services coordinator so that we can carry that forward. As of this moment, it's on the shelf and no movement has been made.
Okay.
And that's my responsibility, Madam Chair.
I appreciate that. If I could go back to your notes from the Public Library Association conference, that session you had mentioned about access barriers, and I was wondering if you could give a little bit more on how to address homebound users of the library. Any ideas you had there? I am envisioning, and this is like just where you know what you start with what you know, like almost like a Meals on Wheels kind of model, but with library instead of food. But if you could expand a little bit more on that, I'd appreciate it.
Chair Knight, you've hit the nail on the head. That's precisely where this session was going about. It's a variant of, it was literally an iteration of a response to the COVID pandemic that started out as how can we get our materials into the hands of community members that need them, that need to stay safe. Started out in the form of, again, stealing the idea from the grocery store, which was delivery of groceries. So can we set it up so that we can deliver these to you when and where you need it? And that has morphed into, there's a lot of our community that might need that to have access to it. And can we sustain it? That's something that I'd very much like to carry forward as part of a conversation internally. We're operating more effectively and efficiently within the library. Over the course of the next 3 to 6 months, we're actively beginning to outreach and get out in the community ourselves. And I am really looking for any sign from the community that there's interest in that. We'll be doing that by default, just starting out with the pedal library and the maker van. There's no real good reason that we couldn't implement this. I can't imagine, based on what I was seeing from the other libraries that have implemented this, it's not going to be an overwhelming response. It will be a critical path response because the people that need it really need it. And so I'm eager to see if we can stand that up. And at the same time, again, leverage the resources that we already have in the maker van, in the pedal library, to try to deliver that and make those connections.
If
There
I
are-
may, too,
Yes.
Director
Yes.
Colgrove, Joy Holt, Department Business Manager for the record. We do have a homebound service now where we deliver print materials to a variety of individuals. We deliver them to some of the nursing homes. It's a traditional homebound service, but it does function similarly to, in some ways, to the Meals on Wheels. And we are consistently trying to grow that. And what we've talked about, to piggyback what Dr. Colgrove was saying, is in terms of the services that we're providing as part of the homebound service is what actual equipment and materials that we're providing. So in my fantasy land, they could have anything they could access at the library that if they were to come to the library, they could receive as a homebound patron as well. So we do something similar to this, but not on this detailed or grand of scale. But we do have a standing program that curates for our circulation librarian does that curation for the current homebound users. And again, we are trying to build up that program. And that is, we're tying that in, obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, but we are tying this in with our senior center outreach. And that's not to imply that only people who are senior citizens would need homebound care. In fact, we had someone reach out to us, and this got us thinking too. We had someone reach out to us recently who had a family member who's terminally ill, not a senior citizen, but someone who's terminally ill and cannot leave home and is an avid book reader. So this would be an incredible service to provide to someone who's on hospice care, for example, like this individual is. So that's certainly something that we've been thinking about as well. And it's just sort of, we're taking these things one step at a time as we, as you know, continue to fill vacancies. So.
And thank you for adding that clarity. Department Business Manager Holt, is spot on. We've been delivering the homebound services primarily to skilled nursing facilities and life care. That question, and it is a topic that we will be exploring in more depth as a staff at our upcoming development day, which is scheduled for May 9th, which is the question of, do we dare open that up, right? I mean, it's as simple as putting a few words on our website, a link, something they can click on, because the libraries that have been implementing that to date, from this presentation, that's exactly what they did. It's just let people know that it's an option, field the phone call, give them a mechanism to get the materials to them, and then collect them. It's more work. The question is, does that fit with what we're able to do as a staff right now, and what might it look like? Thank you for the question, Chair.
Of course, and I do have just one more follow-on to that, and I don't even know if it's in the same category or bucket, but if you could talk a little bit about after school programming, if that is I think of it as a potential access barrier, especially when we deal with transportation, where you might have students who wish to attend, but transportation is potentially a barrier if they're not driving yet. But maybe it's not considered that way. I don't know. I'm not a librarian, so.
It's an excellent point. It's a huge problem. Depending on where in this city that you might live, and it's after school. In terms of after school programming, what we have on deck right now is the proposal that we had put to the state library in terms of rebooting our outreach and engagement with students from middle school, or around the middle school age brackets. They asked us to rework the proposal along with some letters of support. We've given that back to them, or we'll be giving that back to them early this coming week. With a green light from them, it's our intent to do exactly that, to hire potentially a couple of part-time workers, but certainly to bring in a consultant to work with staff in terms of doing the outreach and engagement. The after-school programming, what that will look like immediately is right here in this building, partnering with the Parks and Recreation Department, who provide, they might not call it a latchkey program, but it's before school and after school programming for a lot of kids. And the question is, can the library be involved with that on a weekly basis, a daily basis? What might that look like? What services would be useful and where would they be useful? That's really the gist of our interaction that we'll be doing over the next 3 months with that community, is to try and get a sense of what that might look like so that we can come back and craft a pilot and carry it forward. I couldn't agree more. It was exactly that kind of outreach that's how the library saved my life when I was a young kid out in the far-flung parts of the county, and the library had outreach that started doing library magic, and there you go. We need to be doing more of that because there are large parts of this community that we can't reach, and those kids can't reach us. There are other opportunities that I really look forward to exploring with the school district itself, including, as you have suggested, Chair, in the past, the potential of even getting a school bus route that might run from point A to point B so that students might have access to come over and hang out at the library or collect some resources. Right now, we don't know all the dimensions that we'll be exploring, but that's exactly what it was around a $25,000 grant that it was more than that, but we're talking about it on the order of $25,000 in funding with this consultant and library staff and resources to suss that out and begin surfacing some of the answers to these questions. I'm convinced that that's where it belongs, and I think that all of the shifts that we're making internally with staffing are all about freeing up staff resources that might be used externally. We've been doing a great job internal to the library building. Over the course of the next years, I hope to be doing a much more effective job external to the library building.
Trustee Lucas, for the record, I believe, and my information is a few years out of date now, but I think that the programming that happens here at the community center for the before and after school programming is elementary only. I believe when you get to middle school, your only option is the Boys and Girls Club. I think that might be all that's left. So I don't think you'll
Run in.
like there's a
There's
lack of options for middle schoolers, that's for sure. But I don't think you'll get to them through the community center program.
You're absolutely right, Trustee Lucas. In a public meeting, suffice it to say that we're sort of finagling it a little bit. By connecting with the families that are using the resources of the Latchkey program, and also other programs that Parks and Rec are supporting, for example, the roller derby programs and others that are external. We're not hoping to capture the entire universe. We're hoping to capture a small sample, right? So kids that may be in the Latchkey program and their parents may have other siblings that are in the age demographic we're looking to. we're looking to kickstart the conversation with them within Parks and Rec because we have access to it, and then follow it upstream wherever that might lead. And it will include the Boys and Girls Club, and it will certainly include the school district itself. But we don't know where else it might lead. And so you're right, spot on. There's a dearth of those programs for middle school kids. And what an opportunity. It gives us there's a chance that we might be able to surface some angle that we can fill that gap that begins to change the future for those kids. To clarify, part of the gap that we see in the library serving that today, I think can be traced back to a relative lack of engagement at the younger ages. We had kids that were using the story time, but we've already shown now that we've doubled, tripled the engagement in that, and that will continue to grow. So to the extent though that the younger age demographic is actively engaged with the library, I hope that we won't lose them as they get further on. But for right now, the state was concerned initially when we were suggesting that we were going to go directly and work with the students in place in the schools. And although I was explaining that actually we already had the invitation to do that work, the pushback was in the form of, well, we need releases for this and releases for that, and all of the hoops and loops that, although we've already covered them, it was not going to be possible to respond, to check all of the boxes that the state needed in time to be able to have access to expend those funds to do the work. And so we went back and I worked with the state library to say, how might we rework this? If we did this, would that be a problem? And we'll be holding our breath for a few days after we send it back to them, but I believe that we've threaded the needle. Thank you for pointing that out, though, because it's a real problem.
And I would say, for the record, Joy Holt, the Department Business Manager, we are working in the collection development team and with the programming team. In fact, I just had a conversation with our Storytime programmer about how can we, and I've had several conversations with other staff, just kind of, sidewalk talking and just occasionally saying, what do you think we should do? And about tweens. And so I said, maybe we should do tween STEAM. Although if I was a tween, I probably wouldn't like the name tween, was my next comment. But that age group. So how do we, and this conversation was born from our excitement over today's really incredibly fun and loud and palpable energy story time. And how do we keep those kids coming once they are of an age where it's more of an independent decision on their part? And so we're thinking about that too. This is so much a part of what we're thinking about. What we're actively thinking right now about how those kids who are 5, when they turn 7, 8, 9, and they've essentially aged out of the demographic that this story time is geared towards, how do we keep them actively engaged, and how do what to do? So we're thinking about that because we really want the library users' experience to be iterative. So you start out as a baby, and then you come as a toddler, and then you continue through elementary, and then you become a lifelong library user. I don't think that it necessarily has to be that way for everyone, but I don't think it's a bad plan either. So we are actively thinking about that always, because that is that middle age. Middle school age is really where they're pivoting away from the library to some extent. And there's data to support that, but just observationally too, we know that's true. So we are really thinking about how do we continue to build on this momentum that we have with the younger age group, the littles.
Well, thank you both. I think that's the end of my musings for the night. Do you all have additional questions? All right. Well, thank you so much for your report. The rest, I think, of the reports were attached. We weren't going to go over unless we had questions, right? Any questions on those? All right.
Nothing popped out at me when I was reviewing.
Very good. Okay. Well, then let's move on to the next agenda item, which is item 6, information only. Board members' announcements and requests for information. Any announcements? Anything you'd like to see? Next agenda. I'm thinking of this as, we usually solicit agenda items for upcoming meetings. I'm kind of curious to know when we talk about, and I don't know if it's next month or if it's June, for the director evaluation, if we want to keep that kind of a clear agenda, a single focus, or if we want to try to have a regular meeting on top of having the eval conversation.
May or June?
I think it'd be June. It could be May. I don't.
I'll defer to
I don't have
Department
it
Business
right
Manager
now.
Joy Holt as the extension of human resources in the library. Is it June or May
I think it
when
has
the
to be done by
evaluation needs to be
June.
done?
June.
It's got to be done by June
Yeah,
30th.
all
right?
unclassified employee
Yeah.
reviews or performance evaluations need to be done need to be entered and completed by July 1.
Yeah.
So
That's what I
the
thought.
sooner we can get it done, the better.
All right. Well,
DA Woodbury, is that your understanding as well?
That is my understanding. I don't know if it applies in this situation. I know they want our unclassified evaluations by mid to late May, but this is a special situation because it requires a public meeting and all that. I'm confident Human Resources will accommodate it as long as you meet that July 1st deadline.
Thank you. Yeah, the conversation I had with them last year is that, and I think we talked about this, DA Woodbury, last year, that we started on the time frame that we had discussed, which was February, March. So yes, June's a quick turnaround time. It would be preferable to have it by May, but again, HR does understand that we have an extenuating situation because of it having to be discussed in a public forum. And I would say too that if we get it in by May, if we have the conversation in May and have the evaluation itself completed by June, we're ahead of the game than we have been in the past few years. So progress will have been made.
Okay. Do we anticipate an appointment for the vacant position on our board? Do we want to put a brand new trustee through that? Maybe it's easier to just try to get it done sooner rather than later.
Madam Chair, I would be surprised if we would have an appointed new member of the board by May. It may be by June that we would have that person in place, but that might also be pretty quick timing.
So I think
Just discuss in May because it's and we're talking about all our meetings at the end of the month.
Yeah,
Discuss in May and then just propose any changes so it gets
if we have
wrapped up and can
something-
get turned in earlier in June or.
Okay. How's that sound? Okay, so if we're going to shoot to put that on the May agenda, is there any other information we need to put on the May agenda, or would you like that to be just eval time and then we're done? I mean, it seemed to be kind of a long agenda item last year we did it, so.
We had some last minute stuff. I feel like
Yeah.
last year was convoluted, but I mean, it's probably a good one. Well, and we're going to be short a member. We anticipate that most likely. So yeah, maybe we just handle that.
Just that, and I want you all to know it if you're going to be preparing reports that we end up not putting on the agenda. I don't want you to be agonizing over those things.
Right,
Um,
I agree, unless something came up that you needed to discuss with us.
We'll shoot for in May. My request would be that the May agenda be, of course, you're going to have your public comment periods and those, but as far as content, that we keep that just to the eval for the director, then. So if we've got something super pressing that cannot wait till the June agenda, then we'll throw it on, but for May, we'll keep it.
If I may, if I'm understanding correctly, then, Madam Chair, it's the board's request that the May meeting be exclusively the agendized item of the director's evaluation, and the reports then in June would catch up the remaining 2-month period.
Yes.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other requests for information, announcements from the board? Okay. Well, let's move right along then to agenda item 7, public comment. Any members of the public who wish to address the library board may do so at this time. Seeing none in the room. Do we have anyone on the phone?
There are no callers on the line at this time.
Thank you. All right. Let's move on next to adjournment. We are adjourned, everybody. Thank you so much for coming.